In this episode, cussing and blinding as I dismantle the front and rear ends of the Speed Twin in a partially successful attempt to fit scrolling LED indicators, and some rather vigorous inner thigh rubbing. 2023 on this channel was very much about my Transalp 750. I think we'd all agree that it's been reviewed to death now though, and as good as it is, it's time to move on.
That's it! I'm sick and tired of talking about yo-yos.
As we wait for the 2024 crop of new bikes to arrive, more of those at the end of the video, I continue to ride, enjoy and discreetly accessorise my 2022 Triumph Speed Twin. Now when I bought it 2.5 years ago, it looked like this, matte grey with that slightly weird yellow stripe on the tank, and to protect the paint and provide grip for my knees, I fitted these rubber pads from Motone Customs. Then I had this custom paint job done. Well, semi-custom, it's BMW Carbon Black. Link in the description if you want more details. And afterwards, when it had been done, I never felt that the Motone pads would look quite right. They're not exactly the right shape for the Speed Twin tank. A bit too long. The Motone logo always annoyed me a bit. And I think it's easy to overdo the Union flag thing. So, for the last 18 months or so, I've been doing without knee pads altogether. Thing is though, in addition to my having even less grip from what had now become a shiny gloss tank, a gentleman can find it a little bit uncomfortable sitting with his legs too close together for long periods of time, so I began looking for a solution. Now, there are transparent pads that supposedly preserve the look of your paintwork, but these can yellow over time and kind of look as if you've wrapped your bike in bubble wrap. I had these snakeskin grips from Tech Spec on my Street Triple, and they were great both in terms of appearance and grip, but I'm not sure they'd suit my Speed Twin. They're also a bit thin. I was looking for something a bit meatier to increase the overall width of the tank so that I didn't have to press my knees so close together. As you can see, my Transalp, for example, offers an ample 30cm girth, whereas the Speedy is an occasionally wince-inducing 22. What I needed was something a bit thicker. Then I saw the new Scrambler 400X at my dealers and noticed the pads that I believe are fitted as standard. They look the right size and shape and were available in a few designs, so I ordered a pair. For what it's worth, I believe that number one, the one I went with, is for the Scrambler 1200, 2 is for the Scrambler 400 900, 3 and 5 are for the Bonnevilles, and 4 is for the Rocket. I think there are a couple of other designs available. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, and I just went with the style that I found most appealing. It's also a full design, if that makes sense, like number 4, the one for the Rocket here. The Motone pads have a lip around the outside, and a slight dish into the centre part. They're grippy enough, but at 10mm at the lip, they're 4 or 5mm slimmer than the Triumph pads in the centre. The OE pads are also finished in a slightly grainy texture, whereas the Motones are smooth and had even begun to show signs of polishing after only a few months of use. Now, to be fair, Motone does also offer this alternative design, which I probably should have gone with in the first place. And at €55, they're also a lot cheaper than the €80 I paid for my Triumph pads. Now, fitting couldn't be easier, but a word of warning, the 3M double-sided tape is very strong, as it has to be, to prevent the pad from moving once it's on, and so you only really get one shot, so take your time. I think the first thing to do is sit on your bike to double-check where your knees actually make contact with the tank. I've seen plenty of pads centered on the tank's cutout, but this won't necessarily be where your knees actually go. Now, the first thing to do is wipe the tank down with the wipe provided in the kit to remove any contaminants like dust, road grime or wax. As it was a slightly chilly 18 degrees in my garage, I warmed up the pad and tank just a bit to make everything a bit more pliable. Then it's really just a question of peeling off the backing paper and going for it. I attached the top first, applying as little pressure as possible just in case, then stood back and made doubly sure everything was where it should be before pressing the rest of the pad firmly to the paintwork. A final quick blast with the heat gun, and then importantly leave the bike for 24 hours to allow the 3M tape to bond correctly to the tank. And the job's a good one. They're more comfortable than the lippy and slightly snaggy Motone flag, and, at least in my opinion, suit my Speed Twin better aesthetically. They're more textured, thicker and even better quality. I like the fact, for example, that the Triumph designers included a very small rain channel on the back, just in case any water does find its way in. The use of genuine 3M double-sided tape, the shorter length which suits the cutout in the Bonneville range better, the discrete pattern and logo, and the fact that it matches my central tank protector. Pricey for 2 bits of rubber, but they're well designed and they look and feel good. Out on the road, it's now much easier to get purchase on the tank with my knees, leading to less pressure on my hands and wrists, and of course the pads effectively make the tank about 3 centimeters wider, something that at least for male riders makes for a far more comfortable riding experience. So on to the scrolling indicators, and perhaps first of all we better deal with the question of why I wanted them. Well, in addition to the fancy but admittedly wholly unnecessary scrolling, they're also quite a bit slimmer than the standard in Europe LED indicators, and they come in an aluminium rather than plastic housing. The LEDs themselves are also a lot brighter. Subjectively, I'd say about 50% brighter than stock. Now, Triumph do offer a non-scrolling version, and who knows, these may well have resulted in less electrical hassle, more on that later, and some of you may be of the opinion that modern scrolling turn signals don't suit a modern classic, and I get that, but I like them, so that's what I decided to go for. Now, the information I could find online made no mention of these LEDs being compatible with the Speed Twin, but the very helpful mechanic at Triumph Algarve connected a pair they had in stock to their T120 demonstrator, which had old-style incandescent bulbs, and they worked right out of the box. No additional relays or resistors, plug it in and they seemed to work, so I bought a set to try. I decided to put them on the rear, which with hindsight was probably the wrong way to go about it, as this involved dismantling the entire back end, mudguard lights and all. I downloaded the instructions, and although it wasn't technically difficult, there are numerous bolts and screws back here, all of which are a different type and size, requiring constant changing between 8 and 10mm spanners, hex keys and Torx keys. From start to finish it took me about 90 minutes, I suppose, but it was worth it. Everything worked perfectly, left and right indicators individually and both together when I put the hazard warning lights on. And it didn't mess with the operation of the stock LED indicators up front either. Success! But I couldn't resist pushing my luck, could I? The next day I went back to my dealer to proudly show off my handiwork and buy a second pair to install at the front. Now, fitting actually proved a lot simpler and less time-consuming than with the rear the day before, involving just removing the headlight to expose the wires that were nestling in the bowl, screw the new LEDs in place, pass the wires and plug in, and 20 minutes or so later it was all working perfectly, or so I thought. Left and right indicators front and rear were working perfectly, but when I now tried the hazard warning switch, i.e. all 4 indicators flashing at the same time, this happened. Hyper-fast blinking for about 5 seconds, and then nothing. The flashing stops completely, and even the turn signals on their own now refuse to work. Nothing until I switched the ignition off and then on again to reset the whole system. So rather late in the day I did a bit more research online and realised that Triumph sells a specific reference for the front and rear of all compatible bikes, and it's all the modern stuff: Tigers, Tridents, Street and Speed Triples and the Rocket. The modern classics aren't listed at all. Now, I could just leave it, of course. I mean, I never actually use the hazard warning lights anyway, but bike MOTs or annual inspections of roadworthiness are just around the corner in Portugal and France, the 2 EU countries I know best, and not having working hazard lights when they're fitted to the bike in the factory would result in a failure. So I have to do something. I thought, well, I can take the front ones off and just have scrolling LEDs at the rear. That worked perfectly on the first day. I'll just go back to that. So I messaged Triumph Algarve, and they advised me not to do anything for the moment and bring the bike in to see if their computer can reprogram the ECU to deal with the scrolling indicators. It's a long shot, but worth trying at the point I'm at now. It could just be that I've put a set design for the rear onto the front, but if you do have any ideas about how to solve this hyper-flashing thing, I'm all ears. If it doesn't work, I'll just remove the front scrollers and put the stock LED indicators back. Anyway, that's where I'm at now. I'll let you know how this pans out in a future video, but be advised, if you do fancy making this upgrade, it's not as straightforward as it might appear. There are numerous product references, and some bikes like my Speed Twin probably aren't compatible at all, at least with the scrolling version that I've tried. There is a menu function outlined in the user manual that allows you to cycle through the different indicator types to tell the ECU which type you've got, incandescent for the US market, LEDs for Europe, etc. But as far as I can see, there's no option for scrollers. Oh well, we'll see what my dealer can do when they plug their computer in. I'll keep you posted. In other news, they've kindly agreed to lend me their new 2024 Tiger 900 GT Pro for a few days next week, so I'll be doing a couple of review videos on that, one of which will be comparing it to my Transalp, as I decide whether I want to upgrade or not. And I'll also be getting my hands on their 400 demo bike too. Not sure if it's the Speed or the Scrambler yet. I'm also being sent a newly developed add-on electronic cruise control for the Transalp, and I've got an interesting riding jeans and jacket review coming up. I don't usually do those because clothing is a deeply personal affair and gear reviews are often a bit, well, boring, but this stuff is good, so you might want to tune in for that. Anyway, that's all for today. Let me know in the comments if you know of a nice, easy solution to my hyper flash problem. All the best for 2024, and as always, thanks for watching.